Hey everybody, welcome back to another episode of Kavinsky's Tutorials. Today, a very detailed walkthrough of Axon 3 by Audio Damage. Really been enjoying this. Got a couple of gripes about it, but overall I really like it. And I love the iOS pricing, only $5. Now, I have a link in my YouTube pinned comments section, which has my affiliate link to Plugin Boutique. If you buy it there, it's not going to cost you anything. Using my affiliate link, I'll get a little small commission. So that'd be great if you can use that, everybody, please. Of course, there are no affiliate links for the Apple App Store anymore. Haven't been for 5 years, unfortunately. Anyway, let's get stuck in. So first, just a little brief overview. So the sounds in this, well, you can sequence them using an external sequencer and just send MIDI in, or you can use the sequencer inside it, which uses the idea of a neural network. And the basic idea there is that this central neuron, that's called Neuron 1, if we click on that, that will be selected and we can see the name up here, Neuron 1. Neuron 1 receives pulses from the clock. So we can set a few different clock rates. So at the moment that's set to an 8, so it's going to receive 8 pulses every bar. And then it can send them out to these different nodes. And we can use a thing called threshold to determine how many pulses the node that is listening, or the neuron that is listening to this neuron, will have to receive before it makes a sound. So that is a way of thinning things down. So for example, if we set a neuron to have a threshold of 3, and this was sending out, let's say, 16 pulses every bar. If this had a threshold of 3, it would mean that this would need to receive 3 pulses from this one before it would make a sound. So it would only make a sound every 4 16th notes. So that means that it would sound every quarter note. And then you can use this threshold control, this offset control, to move the position of its notes. So we'll look at that using one of the factory presets. So here, this basic 4 on the floor, I'm going to change the offset down to 0, and I just stopped and rewound the transport, and I'll press play. And this one here, listen to this one here, this kick. Listen when the kick comes in. Okay, so the kick is coming in every quarter note, so 4 times in a bar, but the problem is that the kick is not starting on the 1. It's starting on the 4. So what we do is just use the offset, and if we put an offset value of 3, it just means that it will already basically count it'll start 3 steps ahead of what it normally would. So the result is that it now starts on the 1. So basically, like, you don't really need to overthink that. All you do is use the threshold to make an event, make a sound like the kick happen more or less often. So if we bring it down here, we're getting 16 of those every bar. and just use the offset to change where it comes in. So that's the basic principle. And so at the moment, this is listening to this one. But we can, and each neuron can listen, and it can send, and it can listen to several nodes at the same time. So, there's all kinds of patterns that you could get going. So we use this section here. We press route. And now this one is listening to that one. And I'll press route again. I'll click on this. That means I want this to send. And then I'll press route and press this one. And now that is sending to that one. And again, how often it plays will depend on what we set up in threshold. And when the beat plays will depend on how we set up offset. So that's the basic principle of this neural network. Now, if we just quickly look at the rest of the UI, and I'll just change the preset we're listening to. So up here, we can either use the internal clock, or we can use the host's clock, so 98 BPM there. And we can change the clock rate. So this will now send 8 pulses into neuron 1 every bar. Sequencer reset. So if we set it to on play, then every time I press rewind and press play again, the sequences go into begin again from the start. But we can set that to never. So now every time I rewind and press play, it's just going to, sorry, that's on play accidentally. Hang on. So you can see here that now every time it's starting from just wherever it last left off. Or we can get it to repeat every measure. So the sequence will play for a bar and then it will reset. It'll just go back to the start of the sequence. So if you set that too short, you might get some neurons that never end up getting triggered if they have high threshold value, for example, so they're not being triggered very often. Now then we have this pitch quantizer, so we can change the root note. We can set scales. Unfortunately, there are a lot of scales, but there's no custom scales option. That's one improvement that could be made. You have transpose. I'll just change the preset. I'll just turn that up for a second, just so you can hear what it's like loud. So you see, you can do some pretty standard stuff with it, but it's basically aimed at doing more experimental stuff. Now down here we have a randomizer, and unfortunately what we don't have is undo and redo, and there's also no way to lock things. So when I say lock things, I mean, like, for example, I really like the way Audio Thing do their randomizers. You can see here I've used this lock function to lock the filter settings and the crusher settings, so that now when I randomize, anything else can be randomized but not those. So that's always really useful. Although Audio Thing need to add undo and redo as well to their apps. But yeah, I really do miss undo and redo, and I'll show you why. Because sometimes using the randomizer, you really just get results that you don't like, or what often happens is you're getting very mediocre results, and you keep clicking through, and then at a certain point, you get one that you actually like, but you've already pressed again and you've just lost it forever. Whereas if there was an undo and redo button, you could go back and get those. So now you can hear randomizing all voices is generally not very successful, no. But it can be very useful to use the randomizer for certain things. So for example, we can just choose the network, right? So you can see here the lines showing the connection between nodes change. And so it'll presumably also change, which ones are senders and which are listeners and so on. And you can change the thresholds. So that is going to change how often different neurons' sounds are triggered. Now, remember, by the way, another thing that you can do if you've got a patch that's just too busy is you can always just take the first neuron, right, which is the master one that sends the main pulse out to the other ones. None of the other ones can go faster than this one unless they might sound like they're faster if they're using the ratcheting system. But with Neuron 1, if we change its threshold, then that's going to slow down everything else because the speed of all the others is relative to the speed of Neuron 1. Now, there are other ways to thin things out too, like with the likelihood knob. Now we can randomize just the current voice. So again, current voice, you can see either by looking up here to see which neuron it is. Now this is neuron 1, this is 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. So that's pretty easy to remember. So we can see current voice is neuron 5. Now if we want, we could solo that. And we can see here, this one highlighted as well. So we could change just this voice. Again, though, just a massive pity there's no undo and redo. because you might play around, get something that you really like, and then you choose another neuron, start to randomize it using current voice. As soon as you get something you like, you've lost everything because you can't go back unless you have saved constantly the whole time. I just keep going on about this. I'm not picking on audio damage here because so many developers don't add, undo and redo, and they really should. It's needed for a very good reason. It's not just a nice to have, in my opinion, if you have a randomizer. A couple of little things about the network. Normally you just see green lines connecting them, but then you don't really know what's sending and what's listening. So if you want to see that, like for example, maybe we want to see, is this the sender and this the receiver, or vice versa? It's not obvious. So we click on route, and this has stayed green. And what that basically means is that this one must be sending to this one. This must be the receiver. This one also must be sending to it. So let's just check that. If I click on this one, this is now the focus. If I click on route, you can see here, this has a red line. And that basically means that this is sending and this one is receiving. Now, if I click on this one, they will be disconnected. So now this one is just receiving from this one. Again, remember, we know that this one is listening because when I selected it, turn route off and select this line stayed green. That means that this is listening to this one. So if I click here and press route, this line will now be red, and that again means this one is receiving, this one is sending. So this is a little bit fiddly. I kind of wish that everything was just shown very clearly without having to click in. Another thing, for example, if I, let's say I want to connect, let's just connect these. So I'll press route. So remember, this one is selected. That means it is the sender in any routing that I set up here. So I've now connected these. This one is listening to this one. But when I click out here, if you're just looking at this and you didn't just see me connecting those, you would not be clear. Is this connected to this, or is it connected to that? You know, to me, it would make more sense if that line went around here rather than straight through. I just find that a bit confusing, even if it is pretty. So this is one of the things that I've seen a few people comment on, and I think it's a valid criticism. Anyway, you can always use the route thing to see what the routing is, even if you might have to click around a few times to figure things out. I think it's one of those things that you just need a bit of time to get used to. So again, remember, if we want this neuron 3 to trigger more often, just give it a lower threshold number. So again, 2 here means that this will have to send 2 pulses before this one sounds. So it's going to be silent for 2 of whatever value this is sending out, 2/16. It's going to be silent. Then it's going to trigger, and then it's going to be silent again for another 2/16 notes, and use offset to change exactly when that triggering happens. Whoops. Now, here for each neuron, we can also set what MIDI note in will trigger it, and we can set what MIDI note out it will send. So this will be triggered by 66. So 60, 61, 62, 3, 4, 5. It's going to be triggered by this. As long as I press synth here. Okay, that's important. Okay, so if we want MIDI note in to trigger that note directly, we're going to have to set synth here. So here we're setting what will happen when a MIDI note goes in to this. Will it just send pulses to the sequencer to move the sequencer forward like the clock is doing here? Or will it actually directly trigger the synth? Here is about what happens when neuron 7 gets triggered. So remember, this is neuron 7. If we set it to MIDI only, it won't make any sound when it triggers. If we set it to synth only, it will make a sound, but it won't send out a MIDI note. Or we can get it to do both. Now, we can change the likelihood of a sound event happening. So, let's just take something kind of busy. So let's just click on neuron 1. So now all of this refers to neuron 1. So now, let's reduce the likelihood. So you hear now that neuron 1 is triggering less. Now it's still triggering a bit because this ratchet is on there. So let's just turn off the ratcheting. So now I'm turning that likelihood up. We could change the clock rate to 32. So now it's really fast. Then we could bring the likelihood down here. So now about we'll only have about 50% chance of triggering the synth. But very important to pay attention to the fact that this likelihood will not affect how often it sends out pulses to the nodes which are listening to it, or the neurons which are listening to it. See, even if I turn the likelihood all the way down there, it's still triggering these other ones. It's just not making any sound now itself, neuron 1. So here we set the velocity and we can have a certain amount of randomness to the velocity. So like that, it's going to be very random. Now, with the ratcheting, we can again set the likelihood. I'm just going to solo this. So we're just listening now to this very short hi-hat, I guess. And let's turn up those number of repeats. So if we set a short total length of time for the ratchet and a lot of repeats, then it will get very glitchy. Well, to the point where it almost just sounds like one longer note, but in the case of this one. So great that it has the ratcheting. So remember that you could always set things up so that some neurons are going to just not be played by the sequencer at all. And you could just do that by turning the likelihood down, and you could set them up so that when they receive MIDI notes, their synth will trigger. And then you could have, like, for example, just a couple of neurons being played by the sequencer, and then you could send MIDI in and just play other ones with the keyboard. I haven't set it up like that. Let's just try quickly here. So here I can have the sequence running and play notes on top as well. And if I don't want to hear the sequence, I just have to turn the likelihood of all of these down. And then I can just play in on the keyboard or use an external sequencer. So you see here I'm using both. So there are only a few things being triggered by the neural network, and the rest is being played in. Nice. So I'm just soloing some of these, trying to find out what's what. Okay, so let's just solo this Neuron 4 and look at the oscillator. So here we can change the pitch. And here the keyboard is lit up, so it's quantized through notes from the keyboard. But the only reason it's jumping there is because I switched from using trackpad to finger. Now, what I have found is my main complaint about this is that sometimes it can be hard to dial in an exact tuning quickly and accurately. So I feel that there should be a bit finer control. Another complaint is this is clearly designed for desktop, and you know, that's fine. Like, we get a lot of apps that get ported from desktop to iOS, but the thing is, you know, Audio Damage have been putting their apps on iOS for years. I'm not complaining, I'm really happy to have them. Great apps, very inspiring. But why not think about iOS at the development stage? Because, excuse me, the way this is set up is that it's only when you press, like if I use the mouse here, you can see the value there. But remember, on a touch screen, like I'm using AUM on my iPad here, normally you would have your finger on it, which is what I do now. And the way it is at the moment, when my finger is on that knob, when I'm trying to move it, I just can't see the value on, you know, unless I come out and move my finger far away. But you know, that's not really ideal for live performance. Live performance, you don't want to have to drag your finger all the way out just so you can see what you're doing. You want to put your finger on a knob, and you don't want anything to move until you start moving. And then you want to be able to move as quickly as possible till you get to the exact position that you want to get to. And you want to be able to see the value. But that's very hard with this. So that's another little gripe. So here we have our main oscillator. And then here we've got noise oscillator. And here there are actually two oscillators for every neuron. So one is the one that you can hear, and then there's another hidden oscillator behind, which can do FM. It can modulate the carrier oscillator, the one that we're hearing. And we can adjust the FM amount and the ratio. Excuse me. So this is getting a bit more noise-like over there, isn't it? And we can just change the decay time for the FM and the envelope there. So now we got this nice metallic kind of sound. If we put it down to the bottom left, then it's not doing anything. Then over here we have this thing, timbre. So I sometimes find it a little bit hard to grab this if I pull it all the way down to the corner, by the way. It's a bit too hidden. The touch point for it is a little bit small. So dragging that up, excuse me, does something like a bit cushion or something. The digital distortion. And then dragging it over here. I forget what that is exactly, but it said in the manual something like it sounds a little bit like filter resonance, but it's not exactly filter resonance. Anyway, it's basically, think of it as a timbre control. Especially this x-axis, and then here bringing in some crushing. Let's move on to another preset. So again, sometimes, to see what's doing what, it's easier to look down here. So we can see that 2 is the kick here. So I've pressed here, so now neuron 2 is selected, and I can solo that. So here we've got that. Now here we can do some band on that. And again, we can control the shape. And we can change whether the band goes from low to high or high to low, depending on which side it's on. We've talked about FM already. So here we can just soften the attack just a little bit, only 25 milliseconds of attack there. And then we can ramp up that decay. And we can see here, and again, look, we got the shape there for that envelope. Very important, by the way, always pay attention to this little mix slider. This mixes between the main oscillator that has the sine, the triangle, and if you want, the FM. And this, when it's over on this side, it's a noise oscillator that can be either something a bit like a cymbal when it's all the way over to the left here, or we can add in white noise. So there we just got the white noise, and here we have a bit of both. So yeah, you really need to pay attention to that, because if this is all the way over here and you're playing around with things here, you're not gonna hear anything, and vice versa. Now, we also have this click thing here. And that's not particularly noticeable actually on this one, the attack, hang on. Nah, get a different one. No, that's the noise one. Let's see. With some of them, the click is very noticeable when we come across one later. So let's look at the FM and AM buses. So if we click on this, we can just quickly go through all of these and pay attention to whether FM and AM values are turned up at all on these knobs. So we can see here, for example, that the second one does. So let me just pop over to the mixer page, and on the solo 3, so now we're listening to Neuron 2, and let me just bring down these FM buses and AM bus things. So you see how those were changing it. Now let's see. So if I bring up that FM bus in, what that's doing basically is it's taking the output of other oscillators, ones where we have set the out knob to have some value above 0. If we have more than one oscillator that has an out knob with a value above 0, those values will be summed, and they will then be used to modulate this oscillator using FM, and how radically they modify it or modulate it will be determined by how high the in is here. So let's see what's sending out. So if we bring these out levels down a bit, we can get something a bit less radical on that. Now what we can also do is we can set it up. I'll just change to a different preset here. It's a bit slower. So here we're just listening to Neuron 3. So let's see, this one, look, is sending AM out. So yeah, we have some ones that are sending AM out, FM, let's see. No, so let's get this Neuron 1 to send a lot of FM out. Let's go back to Neuron 3, which is the one that's soloed here, and turn up FM in. Okay, so if we turn that all the way up, now that is being very heavily modulated by Neuron 1's output. So we could bring the FM out of Neuron 1 down a bit to make that less radical. We're on Neuron 3 again now. Or we could bring that in value here down a bit to make it less radical as well. So remember, this is separate FM from what is done here. This is using the neurons, in this case Neuron 3. It's using its oscillators, hidden FM oscillator, okay, all that stuff. All of this, that's all separate, I think so anyway, from the FM modulation coming in from the other neurons. So if we just unsolo that, and let's just go back, and I'm going to just increase the FM out and in of some of these. And you see we can get a lot going on there, and you know, it can get very crazy obviously. So it's up to you how you tweak it. I've just gone back to the original preset there. So then here we have AM amplitude modulation. So here, let's turn down the AM on that. Okay, so that's it without any amplitude modulation. And this is it with lots of amplitude modulation. And if we click on these, we can see Neuron 1 is sending a lot of amplitude modulation. So you've always got to think in terms of what's sending, what's receiving, what's going out, what's going in. neuron 2 a lot going in. Now, remember, we could also increase its own out here, and then it's basically starting to, we got a feedback loop. It's modulating itself now as well as being modulated by others. So that can all get very complicated and interesting, or just messy and horrible if you don't dial it in right. Now, if you just want to audition sounds, then press this. And so if you're making a patch, you might want to just set up some external sequencer to just send in the particular MIDI note, set something up to just send in a note 60, so you don't have to bother triggering it, or, just set it up so that its own triggering is happening at a rate that you want, that is going to help you keep your hands free so you can dial in the sound that you want. And one thing is here, again, always pay attention to this mix knob. But here, there's just this weird space, right? Well, this is supposed to be an oscilloscope, and the desktop version should have that, I believe. But Audio Damage ran into some sort of issue, apparently, during beta testing. Found that the scope was not working, was causing some kind of problems, and just ended up disabling it. So that's a pity, but it's not a big deal. It's decorative, really. But still, it'd be nice if it was there. Hopefully they can fix that. So let's look at the noise section. So let's see. Okay, let's look at the mixer section. Okay, so I just was checking if this is sending anything to the FX section, and it's not. So that's just fine. That's the way I want it. Let's just go back. So you can see here, this one is all the way over to the noise side. And here we've got this sine or triangle oscillator over on this side. And we can have a mix of them, which can be quite nice. And then, as mentioned earlier, we can turn this mix knob down here, in which case it'll be more like a cymbal. And then we have our attack, decay, and shape for the envelope. Filter, low pass, band pass, high pass. If you change the pitch here and you don't get all that much change, well, you've probably got the filter frequency. You've probably not opened the filter much. Let's put it on the low pass. Okay, so there you can hear that we can get a fair bit of difference in the pitch there. But this now is just white noise, so I don't think the pitch affects it when the mix is all the way over there. I think it only affects when it's, you know, the cymbal part. But definitely the filter affects both. I'm sure it's mentioned in the manual, by the way, whether this affects both. I will say one thing, Audio Damage do great manuals. Really hats off. It's so much work to make a good manual like that. And they explain everything very clearly. If you're you know, new to synths and drum machines and all the other different effects and stuff that Audio Damage make, you could just learn so much by just reading their manuals. So we also have this, okay, modulation amount, and basically the modulation can open or close the filter depending what side it's on. So we'll either get it sounding like we're sweeping down or sweeping up. And you can choose the modulation source. Is it the noise envelope generator? Then play around with this. Or you can use the oscillator band envelope generator. And so on. Oscillator. I think that's related to this oscillator envelope, maybe one of the things to double check in the manual. So let's look at setting up multi-out. So we can set up the output for each neuron, along with its level, pan, and FX sound amount, and whether it's soloed or muted here. We can also do all this in the mixer. So let's just send a few things to auxiliary 1. I'll do this with my finger, it'll be easier, I think. You know, it can be a bit hard to read some of this on an iPad. Bit small. So now these are going to auxiliary 1, these are going to 2, these are going to 3. So what we do here in AUM, different hosts will have different ways of dealing with this. Click here, click on multibus audio unit instances. Click on this. So this is now auxiliary 1. And the easiest way in AUM to create that auxiliary 2 is just to press here and press duplicate. And this is now auxiliary 2. And we can duplicate again. And this is auxiliary 3. So we could have different effects on different sounds without, you know, having to open multiple copies of the app and so on. And especially with an app like this, where there's a lot of randomization possibilities, it would be a mess if you were trying to do this with multiple instances. So yeah, good that it's got that. So yeah, just let's finish things up. We'll just look at the last couple of things. So mixer and FX section, we got that here. Again, we can see what's being triggered here. And look, you also can even see the neuron position there. And then here, the delay. So again, we can do all our sends here. So for example, turn up the FX send there. And here we turn on the sync time maybe. And maybe bring up a bit of feedback. And let's say an eighth and a dotted eighth. That sounds all right. Okay, so you've got your delay here. We've got color control, width and level. So you can keep it nice and narrow if you want. Go on to the next preset. And then here you've just got a very simple compressor with just attack and release time, makeup gain, the ratio, sensitivity, and just toggle it on or off there. So you can crank that pretty hard. And then here, just different levels for the main and the auxiliary outputs. So we'll finish off with just a very quick review. I really like this. I think this is probably going to be the main drum machine I grab in the future if I want electronic sounds. I think it would definitely take me time, a fair bit more time to get used to like really dialing things in intentionally with this neural network, but it's really not that hard to grasp the basics of it. The only criticism I'd make of it is what I mentioned earlier. It's a little bit fiddly to see what's sending and what's receiving. You need to click this route button and then you need to maybe choose a few different ones, because remember, any one that you choose, that will always be the sender, and sometimes you need to just play around a little bit before you figure out what's sending, what's receiving. As I mentioned, I feel like it's not very clear always here. Is this sending to this, or is this one sending to this? Or is this one not even connected to this? It might also just be going directly to this one. It might be sending to it, it might be receiving to it. The only way to find out is to press them and use this routing thing. It's a little bit tedious. I love that it's got the pitch quantizer, but honestly, it would be great if it had custom scales. If we want to look at a very good example of how to implement custom scales, Harmony Bloom. Great app. Did a video on this recently. You know, here you can you've just got your little keyboard and just set up, okay, I just want a scale with just these 4 notes in it. That's my custom scale set up, boom. I just don't know why so few apps have custom scales. Another major gripe, really major gripe, Randomizer should have undo and redo. It should have ability to lock certain parameters. I mean, I know that you already get a little bit of direction and focus and control with these, but it would still be nice to say, for example, I want to randomize all the thresholds except Neuron 1 and 2, and you'd have a button up here where you could lock their threshold values or whatever, you know? I think that would be good. But honestly, undo and redo, it's really starting to annoy me that so many apps with randomizers don't have undo and redo. At the same time, I'm not like picking on audio damage here, because the app developers that do undo, redo, and, you know, parameter lock-in for randomizers are so few and far between. But we really need to see that more, so I always call it out when that's not there, and I always praise it when it is there. As I mentioned also earlier, I wish that some of the settings that currently need to be set up per neuron, like what happens when you send MIDI in, or, you know, whether they send MIDI out or not, I just wish there were also some global controls for those. I do understand, though, there are trade-offs in a UI, and I mean, as mentioned, there's already a fair bit going on this UI, at least for an iPad. So yeah, but still, maybe just a little settings menu or something could have those. I love that it's got ratcheting. The likelihood controls are really nice. Just add a little bit of variety in. I do wish that you didn't have to turn the likelihood off for every single neuron if you just want to control it just by sending MIDI in and not have it triggering by its own sequencer. As I mentioned earlier in the video, a few other people have commented on that. None of us could find any way to do that, and it just seemed like a little bit of a hassle to do something that felt like it could be done with just one button press. The synth, I mean, everything sounds great. It's really cool that it's got stuff like the FM and AM buses. This is something that you kind of need to play around with a little bit to find out what's going to sound good. Nice that it has the XY pads. Pity that it doesn't have the scope, but it's not a big deal. Good to have the option about what goes through to the filter. Good to be able to just easily mix your level of the sine or triangle oscillator with the noise oscillator. Nice that you can mix between the more cymbal-like sound and the white noise, and that you have these different modulation sources and so on. And it's good that it has multi-out options, even if it's a bit strange that it limits them to 3, because it just seems it wouldn't really be hard to have 7. And some people would maybe like to have each one as a separate out. There must be some reason why it was done like this, I don't know. But it's a bit weird, at least from an iOS user perspective. Any drum machine I can think of on iOS that has multi-outs has a multi-out for each oscillator or whatever it is. But what a cool app, very inspiring, really fun. Oh yeah, I forgot about this as well. If you click here, you can also do MIDI learn for what the MIDI note in to trigger one would be. I don't think I've actually tried that. Now you don't have to do MIDI learn, because you can see it's already set up. For example, that 60 will trigger the first Neuron's synth. But let's just see. So if I wanted this to send MIDI out on 62, for example, yeah, there we go. Now I've just pressed the 62, the D key here, and it's learned that. So that's very good, actually. I love that. Yeah, really handy that it has that MIDI learn. If you wanted to send this out to control another drum synth, for example, some of them have weird mappings. that's a pretty painless way to set it up. So great synth overall, great drum synth, good for melodic stuff too. And what an amazing deal on iPad for $5. Now remember everyone, if you are buying the desktop version, please use my affiliate link. It won't cost you anything and I'll make a little bit of money from it. And I make so little from YouTube that I really need every bit of support I can, whether it's Patreon or using affiliate links, direct donations, whatever. This is a very, very small niche iOS music. Thank you everyone for watching. I hope you enjoyed this. This is not my first run through of this video. I've been trying to make this video for about 4 hours tonight and I ended up abandoning the other ones. It's about 2 in the morning, I guess. So it's really time for me to get this done and I'll upload it to YouTube tonight and it'll be up there tomorrow, i.e. today your time if you're watching it, tomorrow my time. Okay, take it easy. Thanks for your support everyone.